How Russia destroyed Kyiv while America looked away. At precisely 2:47 in the morning on June 2, 2026, air raid sirens tore through the sleeping streets of Kyiv. Ukrainian citizens have learned to distinguish, by pitch alone, a routine alert from a catastrophic one. On the morning of June 2nd, the tone was different. Radar operators at the National Air Defense Command Center confirmed 187 Shahed 136 kamikaze drones entering Ukrainian airspace simultaneously from the east and south, followed by 43 ballistic missiles launched from deep inside Russian territory. By any military measure, what followed was the largest single-night aerial assault on a European capital since the Second World War. And when the sun rose over the rubble, the question consuming every foreign policy discussion in every capital that mattered was not how Russia executed the attack. The question was why the world's most powerful alliance could not prevent it. To understand June 2nd, you first have to understand where America was looking. President Donald Trump and his entire national security team had spent the previous weeks fully consumed by the crisis in the Persian Gulf. The 2026 Iran war had closed the Strait of Hormuz, cut off 20% of the world's oil supply, and was costing the American economy $1.4 billion per day. Every senior official in Washington, from the Secretary of State to the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, was running on no sleep, locked in ceasefire negotiations mediated by Pakistan between the United States and Iran. For the Trump White House in the early hours of June 2nd, Europe was a secondary theater. Russia had been planning around that fact for months. Vladimir Putin has spent 4 years systematically studying the limits of American foreign policy. When Iran closed the Strait of Hormuz in late February 2026, Putin did not express concern. He expressed strategic relief. A United States fully absorbed in a Persian Gulf war cannot simultaneously sustain maximum pressure on the European front. And maximum pressure on the European front is the one factor that had prevented Russia from achieving its core objectives in Ukraine. Putin understood this asymmetry with perfect clarity. He had been patient. By June 2nd, the calculation was complete. The window was open, the timing was optimal, and the cost of restraint now exceeded the cost of action. The mechanics of the June 2nd attack were the product of months of deliberate Russian preparation that went largely undetected. Intelligence analysts at the Ukrainian Defense Ministry confirmed that Russia had spent 6 weeks quietly repositioning Shahed drone stockpiles at forward launch sites closer to the Ukrainian border than at any previous point in the war. This repositioning was possible because American satellite surveillance assets, which had previously tracked Russian logistics in close detail, had been partially redirected toward monitoring Iranian military activity in the Persian Gulf. Russia moved its pieces methodically, while the world's most sophisticated intelligence apparatus was pointed at a different theater. Ukrainian air defense crews performed what military analysts described as a near miracle under the circumstances. Ukraine's layered defense system, combining American Patriot batteries, Norwegian NASAMS units, German Iris-T systems, and modified Soviet-era S-300 launchers, intercepted 168 of 187 incoming drones, and 39 of 43 ballistic missiles. The mathematics of what remained, however, are impossible to soften. 19 drones and 4 missiles got through. 23 successful strikes across a city of 3 million meant 16 civilians killed, over 200 wounded, and 11 residential buildings destroyed. The most devastating impact was a ballistic missile that struck a 7-story apartment complex in the Dniprovsky district at 3:22 in the morning, causing a partial collapse of 4 floors. 47 residents were unaccounted for when rescue teams arrived at dawn. The financial cost of defending Kyiv for a single night is a number almost no Western outlet presents clearly. Each Patriot PAC-3 interceptor missile costs approximately $4 million per unit. Ukraine fired 39 of them in a single engagement. The defense of one city on one night required $156 million in American-manufactured missiles that Ukraine cannot produce or replace through its own industrial base. Ukraine depends entirely on the pace at which the United States and NATO can manufacture and deliver these interceptors. Every independent assessment in 2026 reaches the same conclusion. Ukraine is consuming interceptors faster than it is being resupplied. The gap is growing. And Russia launches these attacks knowing the arithmetic perfectly well. The American response was measured in hours, not minutes. Trump did not publicly address the Kyiv attack until 9:17 in the morning, more than 6 hours after the first impact. Secretary of State Marco Rubio issued a formal condemnation at 8:30, calling the attack a war crime. The statement contained no new weapons transfers, no sanctions package, and no specific policy response. European leaders moved faster and with sharper language. French President Emmanuel Macron convened an emergency NATO call within 90 minutes of the attack being confirmed. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz addressed the Bundestag with a specific demand. The United States must immediately authorize the transfer of extended-range ATACMS missiles to Ukraine. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk called publicly for NATO to invoke Article 4 consultations and described Russia's behavior as a calculated decision to use the peace process as cover for continued military aggression. The extended-range ATACMS is the weapon at the center of every serious conversation about this war. It can strike targets inside Russian territory at ranges of up to 300 kilometers. If Ukraine had this system, it could reach the Russian air bases from which bombers conduct their cruise missile sorties. It could strike the Alabuga industrial complex, where Russia manufactures its Shahid drones, at 3,200 units per month. It could hit the Iskander missile storage facilities near Voronezh. It could force Russia to defend its own territory, rather than operating freely from sanctuaries no Ukrainian weapon can currently reach. The Trump administration has declined to authorize the transfer, citing concerns about provoking nuclear escalation. Ukraine's military commanders respond with a question that grows more urgent with every attack. If this does not constitute escalation, what does? The phone call between Zelenskyy and Trump on the morning of June 2nd was not comfortable. Zelenskyy presented the American president with a binary choice. Either the United States provides Ukraine the ability to strike Russian launch sites on Russian soil, or Russia will continue launching indefinitely, because nothing currently stops it at the source. Zelenskyy told Trump directly that the June 2nd attack was deliberately timed to coincide with maximum American distraction over the Persian Gulf. He said Putin had analyzed the situation with cold precision, and that the 16 people killed in Kyiv that morning had died in part because of that distraction. Trump reportedly responded that the United States was doing everything it could, and that he would get back to Zelenskyy by the end of the week. The frontline picture in eastern Ukraine has been changing quietly while the world's cameras pointed at the Persian Gulf. In the Zaporizhia region, Russian forces have advanced 11 kilometers in the 4 months since the Iran war began. In Donetsk, The city of Pokrovsk, the critical logistics hub for an 80-kilometer stretch of the Ukrainian front, is now within 4 kilometers of Russian artillery range. Ukrainian commanders there have been warning for months that the loss of Pokrovsk would catastrophically compromise Ukrainian supply lines across that entire sector. These advances are occurring at a pace not seen since the opening days of the full-scale invasion. They are happening because Russia has exploited the strategic distraction of the Iran war with disciplined operational consistency. The Geneva peace talks scheduled between Ukrainian, Russian, and American representatives now face serious questions about their viability. France, Germany, and Poland issued a joint declaration demanding that the United States impose additional sanctions on Russia's energy sector and expedite long-range weapons transfers to Ukraine immediately. The Trump administration had not formally responded to the declaration as of this writing. The framework, constructed through weeks of delicate diplomatic engagement, faces the fundamental credibility problem of one party bombing a civilian population of millions while simultaneously discussing peace terms at the same table. The Ukrainian air defense system that fought through June 2nd is a depleted version of what existed 18 months ago. 4 years of continuous warfare have consumed every category of interceptor missile below NATO-designated sustainable thresholds. Ukraine's Patriot stocks, NASAMS reserves, and modified S-300 inventory are all insufficient to simultaneously defend multiple major cities against a coordinated multi-vector attack. On June 2nd, defending Kyiv alone required 39 Patriot interceptors. If Russia launches coordinated simultaneous attacks on Kyiv, Kharkiv, Odessa, and Lviv in the same operational window, Ukraine would face decisions about which cities to prioritize that no commander should ever be forced to make. Russia is fully aware of these constraints. Multiple analysts have concluded that the June 2nd attack was specifically designed to stress Ukrainian air defense resource allocation at its most vulnerable seams. The question that June 2nd places before every government that has made formal commitments to Ukraine is whether those commitments were genuine or contingent on geopolitical convenience. Russia's calculation is that they were always contingent, that when American attention is consumed by one crisis, the promises made about another theater become easier to defer, to quietly downgrade, and eventually to abandon without ever being formally withdrawn. 16 people were killed in Kyiv on June 2nd. 47 families stood at the edge of a rubble field at dawn, waiting for information that, for many of them, did not come. A city that has buried its dead and rebuilt its windows and sent its children to school in underground bomb shelters stood once again in the smoke of another devastated morning. It asked the question it has been asking since February 2022. Is the world still watching? The answer that June 2nd provided was precise and difficult to misread. The world was watching a different war, and Russia had spent months of meticulous strategic planning ensuring that it would.